ఉంటుంది లేదా? Guys, please confirm to me. All of you get my voice on screen. Those are attending in online. Guys, please confirm to me. All of you get my voice on screen. Those are attending in online. Is my voice is clear to all of you guys? Everybody, please respond for me, guys. All right. Good morning, guys. And check it what we completed in the last session. Right, sir. Then up to this first application development, it's like little bit theory. So don't neglect that theory, but theory will make you to understand the practicals effectively. So don't neglect the theoretical content. Why? Because if you know theory, then only practicals are very simple. If you don't know theory, practicals are somewhat difficult. And one more thing I'm telling there, theory will provide more depth for the subject everywhere in any context. So if you know the subject, then automatically you will get more confidence on the subject. So better don't neglect that content. All right, sir. So can you check it what we completed there in the last sessions? Just we are understanding steps to prepare web applications. Under the steps to prepare web applications, what are the various steps are available and what we completed already? If we observe this, download and install server software. That is what there, Tomcat. Download and install Java software and IDE or maybe editor. Anyway, this step is already completed. Right from core Java onwards, we have seen that. No need to think about it. Download and install server software, that we already seen that. Next one, prepare web application architecture. First of all, tell me guys, all of you have installed Tomcat server? All of you have seen the Tomcat, at least home page of the Tomcat? All right. So prepare web application architecture. Prepare deployment to descriptor. I think so we completed what their web application architecture is also we completed. The total, when we install Tomcat, what files and folders are available for our application, what files and folders here we have to create, and everything here we provided. Next one is what there, prepare deployment to descriptor. That is what there, web.xml. Prepare web resources like HTMLs, servlets, JSPs, and so on. Start the server and deploy the web application, then access the web application. Almost all, first 3 steps we completed already. Remaining 4 steps here we have to discuss. Now today we need to talk about like what there, deployment to descriptor. Prepare what there, deployment to descriptor. That content here we have to understand. Download, install server software we completed. Then after that, prepare web application architecture. Okay. And then after that, Next one is like what there, prepare a deployment descriptor. Right. Sir. Let's see this one. What is deployment descriptor? First understand it. What is deployment descriptor? After that, we are going to understand what is the role of the deployment descriptor in web applications, and some important information we are going to see about this deployment descriptor once if you understand the definition. What exactly the meaning of deployment descriptor? All right, sir. Answer is very clear. Deployment descriptor all right, sir. Deployment descriptor is web.xml file. Observe carefully. Here I'm not saying an XML file. I'm not saying like simply an XML file. I'm saying web.xml file. Means that name is fixed. The name is fixed. Not possible to change that name. So deployment descriptor is what their web.xml file. Cool. What it will provide? What this web.xml file is able to provide? It is able to provide. It is able to provide all the configuration details of the present web application, all the configuration details of the present web applications which are required by the server and container, which are required by the server and container in order to identify the server side resource, in order to identify the server side resources, and in order to execute server side resources. That's it. This is what exactly the meaning of like what there deployment descriptor. Please read the statement here, what I have given. Read the statement. Everybody try to digest the point here, what I said to you. For each and every statement, I can give some meaning there, but first of all, understand it. What is this deployment descriptor? Deployment descriptor is a web.xml file. It is able to provide all the configuration details of the present web applications which are required by the server and container, in order to identify the server side resources and in order to execute the server side resources. Clear? Deployment descriptor is a web.xml file. It is able to provide all the configuration details of the present web application. All the configuration details of the present web application. Application required some configuration details. Application has some configuration details. All these configuration details are provided inside like what their web.xml file. Moreover, that configuration details are required by the server and container. That configuration details are required by server and container. For what purpose there? In order to identify the server side resources, in order to execute the server side resources. Understand it clearly now? Okay, fine. After that, what application configurations it able to provide? Web.xml file is providing configuration details of the present web application. What details, what configuration details it able to provide? All right, now observe carefully. In web applications, in web applications, deployment descriptor deployment descriptor is able to provide the following configuration details of the present web application. Right, sir. Deployment descriptor is able to provide the following configuration details. I'll give some configuration details of the present web application. Let's see this. It's a somewhat, if you talk about it, nearly 30 to 35 configuration details are available. Nearly 30 to 35 number of configuration details we can provide in a web.xml file. What are all these configuration details now? First one, of course, you may not aware about all these names even. Don't worry. Throughout our servlets, we are going to discuss these concepts. But first of all, let me list out all the configuration details. Very first one is welcome files configuration. Second one is, I'll explain each and every one, but not immediately. While moving on to the subject, you'll understand everything, whatever the list I'm giving there now, right? But as of now, just list of the content here I'm telling you. Next one is display names, display name configuration. Then after this display name configuration, another one is servlets configuration. Next one is JSP's configuration. Then after that, filters configurations. Filters configurations. Next one is listeners configurations. After this, listeners configurations, session timeout configurations. Session timeout configurations. After this, session timeout configurations, tag libraries configurations. Then after that, initialization parameters configurations. Initialization parameters configurations, context parameters configurations. Then after this, context parameters configurations. Next one is security configurations. Security configurations. After this security configurations, error pages configurations, error pages configurations, and so on and so on and so on. So many. Just I'm giving some of the configuration details only. So many, depending on different topics. So many configuration details are available. Observe carefully what I'm telling you now. All right. Now observe carefully what are the various configuration details here. First one is welcome files configurations, display names configurations, servlets configurations, JSP's configurations, filters configurations, listeners configurations, session timeout configurations, tag libraries configurations, initialization parameters configurations, context parameters configurations, security configurations, and error pages configurations, and so on. So many things are available. But just only 10 to 11 number of list I've given. Try to recognize the names. That's it. But don't think what is the purpose of each and every one. Even without starting first application, not possible to understand that each and every part here. In the future, we are going to understand each and every content. Definitely, whatever the things here I specified there, everything will be covered in the future. But depending on the concept, these parameters or these configuration details are spreading throughout the servlets. Not even at the first application there now. Right. And one more important configuration here I missed it here, then I need to give that one even. Load on startup configuration. Yeah, this is also required for us. Load on startup configuration. That's okay, fine. Next one is now to start first program, to move on to the first program. I don't require all these configurations, but only one configuration I required here. That is what their servlets configuration. I need only one configuration. That is what their servlet configuration. And if you observe carefully, the next one is like what their servlet configuration in deployment descriptor. Servlet configuration in what there? Deployment descriptor. Observe carefully. All right, sir. Then after that, what is this servlet configuration actually? What is the requirement to provide servlet's configuration in web.xml file? Right. Answers are very clear. Now try to understand this answer. First of all, tell me guys, you know already this point, entire web application architecture is divided into two parts. What are the two parts there? First one is what there? Public area, and second one is what there? Private area. Client area. Public area is nothing but what? Client area, and private area is nothing but what there? Server area. Then what is the difference between public area and private area? If we keep any resource under public area, client can access that resource with its name directly. But if we keep any resource under private area, client cannot access that resource with its name directly. Client can access that resource by having alias name for that resource, some duplicate name, or maybe locator, or maybe URL pattern for the respective resource. Through that only we are able to access the respective resource. So here we have to define one alias name for the respective private area resources or not. Take an example, servlet. In general, we are keeping that servlets under classes folder, that is under private area. If we define any servlet, no, then definitely we have to define some alias name for the servlet. Alias name, or maybe like what their URL pattern or locator for the servlet here we have to define. To define this alias name or locator for the servlet there, we need to configure the servlet class in a web.xml file. In web.xml file only we are able to provide mapping between servlet class as well as like what their servlet class as well as like what their respective alias name or URL pattern. To provide this mapping between URL pattern and the servlet class name, we need to provide servlet configuration inside like what there inside the web.xml file. That is the requirement of the servlet configuration in a web.xml file. Right now, I'm going to prepare some points here. Now try to understand, try to recognize the content here clearly. What is the requirement of the servlet configuration in web.xml file? The question is very clear. In general, we will keep servlets. In general, we will keep servlets under classes folder. In general, we will keep servlets under what their classes folder. That is private area. That is what their private area. Private area. So here to access servlet classes, we have to define an alias name or an URL pattern or a locator. That means all are same, different names I'm telling there. We have to define an alias name or an URL pattern or a locator. Okay, to define alias name for the servlet and to provide mapping between alias name and the servlet to provide mapping between alias name and the servlet, we must provide servlet configuration in a web.xml file. It's clear to all of you? Read this statement, what I said to you. Servlet configuration and deployment to descriptor, that is the actual point. Okay. First of all, I given clarity what is the requirement of it. In general, we will keep servlets under classes folder, that is private area. Here to access servlet classes, we have to define an alias name or an URL pattern or a locator. To define alias name for the servlet and to provide mapping between alias name and the servlet, we must provide servlet configuration in what their web.xml file. Clear or not? What is the requirement of the servlet configuration web.xml file? This is the main requirement. Okay, fine. Requirement we understood, but how to provide, how we are able to provide servlet configuration in web.xml file? How it is possible to provide servlet configuration in web.xml file? All of you observe carefully. To provide servlet configuration in web.xml file, to provide servlet's configuration in web.xml file, we have to use the following tags in a web.xml file. We have to use the tags. What exactly the tags here we have to use? Now let's see these tags now. Observe carefully. What exactly the tags here we are using it? Now try to understand it. First of all, web.xml file will start with a particular tag, that is what their web app tag. This is a root tag. This is what their root tag in a web.xml file. It represents web application configuration details. Present application configuration details. What is the root tag in web.xml file? Web app. Web-app. Simply, you have to by heart these tags up to some part. Okay. But anyway, by practicing more and more on these examples, automatically you can remember these tags now. All right. Now, inside these web app tags, web app tag, so many tags are available. Out of all these tags, for the sake of this servlet configuration, we have a separate tag, servlet tag slash servlet tag, and another tag is also available, that is what their servlet mapping tag slash servlet mapping tag. Clear? Two tags are representing total servlet, single servlet configuration. One is what their servlet, another one is what their servlet mapping. Servlet tag is able to take servlet data, servlet information. Servlet mapping tag is able to provide mapping between servlet and alias name. Okay, now let us see this. For this, so many tags are available, but not required for us. Inside the servlet tag, some other tags are available. What are the some other tags now? First one is like what I am telling there, servlet name tag. Here we are going to provide what their logical name of the servlet slash servlet name, logical name of the servlet class. Okay, I said to you previously, URN if you want to use to refer a particular servlet, where we are going to provide logical name to refer a particular server side resource. This is the logical name for the servlet. Along with the servlet name tag, what we specified there, that is what their logical name. Next one, after that, servlet class tag is available. Servlet class tag. Inside this servlet class tag, what we are having there, fully qualified name of the servlet class. Fully qualified name of the servlet class slash servlet class. Fully qualified name of the servlet. That's clear? Fully qualified name of the servlet. That's okay. Fully qualified name of the servlet class. Okay, that we can understand. So these two things are existed inside like what their servlet. In servlet tag, how many things are available here? Only two tags. What are the two tags now? Servlet name, and second one is what their servlet class. Servlet name tag is able to take like what their servlet name tag is able to take like what their logical name of the servlet. Servlet class tag is able to take like what their fully qualified name of the servlet class. Clear or not? Okay, fine. Let's come for the servlet mapping tag. No, inside this servlet mapping tag, here we are able to have like what there again, servlet name, same logical name slash servlet name. Whatever the logical name we define under servlet tag, no, Same name we have to provide under servlet mapping along with the servlet name tag. That is required. Next one after that. Under the servlet mapping tag. Next one is what there? URL pattern. URL pattern. Then we can provide what there? Slash pattern name, alias name. Slash URL pattern. How many URL patterns can we want to define there? Maybe one here I provided. At the same time here we can provide multiple. Any number of URL patterns here we can provide. Not even exactly one now. We can provide so many. More and more number of URL patterns here we are able to provide. Yes, sir. Got it or not? More and more number of URL patterns here we are able to provide. Clear to all of you? All right, sir. This is a clear-cut information like what there URL patterns content here now. That's it. Now these are about like what their total web.xml file now. All right, sir. Observe carefully the tags information I'm telling there. All of you now tell me to represent a particular servlet configuration in web.xml file. Mainly two tags here we are using. What are the two tags here we are using there now? One is what there servlet tag. Another one is what there servlet mapping tag. Inside the servlet tag again two tags are available. What are the two tags now? Servlet name and a servlet class. In a servlet mapping tag again two tags are available. What are the two tags now? Servlet name, URL pattern. Servlet name tag is repeated in both the servlet and as well as what there servlet mapping. Same logical name we have to provide for the servlet name under servlet tag and for the servlet name under servlet mapping tag. Same name we have to provide. Why the same name is required? I will give discussion. I'll discuss with you later on. Got it or not? All right, sir. Now here URL pattern in the sense how many number of URL patterns we can define there? How many number of URL patterns we can define there? One or more. One or more number of, not exactly one, of course one also. One URL pattern or more number of URL patterns here we can define for the servlet, a particular servlet. Also practically we are able to see that point clearly. Right, sir. That's okay, fine. Example, if I take an example, there we can understand clearly this point now. Example is like what I'm telling to you, observe carefully. I have a login servlet. What servlet is available there? Login servlet. Now let me take this one. Web app tag slash web app tag. Observe carefully. While writing these tags now, what exactly the approach I'm following? Now try to follow that approach. When I take open tag, then immediately provide what there close tag. Otherwise, you may not get any confusion if you follow this. Otherwise, you may get confusion. Then inside this, what tag here I have to use there? Servlet tag. What tag here we have to use there? Servlet tag. Again here we have to use like what there? Servlet tag. Now inside the servlet tag, two tags here we have to define. One is like what there? Servlet name. Another one is what there? Servlet name. Now here just login servlet is my servlet actually. So I'm going to use login servlet is a logical name slash servlet name. Then after that we need to provide like what there servlet class. What is the servlet class actually? com.dss dot Durgasoft solutions com.dss dot login servlet slash servlet class. Right, of course it's a fully qualified name here we can understand. Of course here we want to take like what the servlets name also we can if we provide no there we are getting some fully qualified name. Right, so now here what I'm telling there com dot okay, leave this one, not mandatory to provide this, just I provided com.dss dot login servlet class. Observe carefully. Servlet configuration is okay. Next one is I need to go with like what their servlet mapping. Immediately close this servlet mapping. Inside this servlet mapping, again two tags here we have to provide. What are the two tags now? Servlet name tag here we have to provide. Servlet name. Right, where we have to provide the same logical name of the servlet what we specified under servlet tag. There what I specified there login servlet slash servlet name. Next one is like what their URL pattern. In URL pattern, what we are able to provide there slash login slash URL pattern. That's it, guys. Now this is about like what there web application. That means servlet configuration in web.xml file. Servlet configuration in what there web.xml file. Yes, sir, got my point or not? All of you are getting clarity in this point or not? This is clearly the point what we are having the concepts now. Clear? Right, sir. After completion of this, the next one is like what I'm telling to you. After understanding this particular point here, I want to give some mapping how this login is mapped with this particular servlet class. I want to give some mapping details. Try to observe this clearly. As per this above web.xml file configuration, simple analysis I'm telling you. What is that analysis now? Login servlet is what there. Come on, guys. Login servlet is what there is a logical name for the servlet, which it mapped with the com.dss.login servlet class or not? As per the servlet tag configuration, mapped or not? Okay. All right. Observe carefully here. After this, now here inside this servlet mapping also same logical name is available that is mapped with the slash login or not. So here we can understand clearly under mapping same login servlet will be mapped with like what there slash login. Observe carefully. If left side parts are same, automatically there should be a mapping between right side parts or not. The simple logic what I'm telling there. Left side parts are them, then automatically there should be a mapping between right side parts. Right or not? The simple example here I'm telling there. See, this is general manipulation. Just for our easy remembering purpose, I given this kind of configuration here. This type of mapping now. So understand it. All right. So now here, what I'm telling to you, there should be a mapping like this. Right. So left side parts are same. Automatically there should be a mapping between right side parts. com.durgasoft.login servlet or maybe slash login. Clear or not? So this is in general what exactly the mapping here I'm telling them. Fine. And now, before moving on to these examples, I need to give some theory, some points about this web.xml file here. Of course, now just you heard about all the points, so that's why you can remember that. After 2 days of time, if you open that web.xml file, every blank we are able to get. That's why I want to give each and every tag information just a minute of time. All right, sir. Now here we can understand from the above web.xml file. From the above web.xml file, number one, a web app is what, sir? Is a root to tag in web.xml file. Represents present web application configuration, present web application configuration details. This is point number one. All right, sir. Web app is a root tag in a web.xml file that represents present web application configuration details. Next one is after that inside this web app tag, what tag is available there? Servlet tag. Servlet tag is able to provide servlet details. Servlet details. Number three. Then what next one can know? Servlet name tag is able to provide logical name of the servlet class. All right. So next one is after that is able to provide the logical name of the servlet class. Next one is servlet class tag is able to provide fully qualified name of the servlet class. Fully qualified name of the servlet class. All right. Next one is after that servlet mapping. Servlet mapping tag is able to provide mapping details of the servlet class with a URL pattern. Mapping details of the servlet class with what their URL pattern. Mapping with the URL patterns. Pattern or patterns. Right, sir. Now here under this URL pattern tag. URL pattern tag is able to provide URL pattern tag is able to provide URL pattern or alias name or locator. These are the names. Locator for the servlet class. That's it, sir. Now this is the point here we can understand, but one small note here I'm telling there. What is that note here I'm telling now? It is possible to define more than one URL pattern for the servlet. More than one URL pattern for a single servlet. For a single servlet. Okay, observe carefully. One more point I'm telling here. It is possible to define more than one URL pattern for a single servlet. It is possible right from servlets 2.5 version onwards. It is possible right from servlets 2.5 version onwards. It is not possible up to servlets 2.4 version. Servlets 2.4 version. More than one URL pattern is possible right from servlets 2.5 version onwards, but it is not possible up to what there 2.4 version. For one servlet, one URL pattern up to servlet 2.4, but right from servlet 2.5 version onwards, we can provide more than one URL pattern for a single servlet. Clear or not? Now this is the purpose of each and every tag what I given there clearly. Right, sir. Some example also we provided some kind of for our understanding purpose. Some mapping also we provided clearly. All right. Then after that, after completion of these mapping details and all, what next one here we have to do there? Now tell me. After completion of this, okay, servlet configuration details that we understood clearly. What is the need of this configuration? We understood. How to configure this? We understood there. All the points are okay, fine. Got it or not? All right, sir. Now, one example also we have given for login servlet. For login servlet, how to provide this web.xml file now. Clear or not? This is the servlet configuration what we are having clearly. Okay, right. Now, I have a question now. Few questions are available. Now let us complete that question. Then after that, I will extend the same web.xml file content anyway. What is my next question here? My question is very clear. Try to understand it now. Is it possible to change the name and location of the web.xml file in web applications? Is it possible to change the name and location of the web.xml file in web applications? There we have to give answer for it. Now I'm telling to you, observe carefully. The name and location of the web.xml file. The name and location of the web.xml file. In place of this, I'm telling the name and location of the deployment to descriptor. Deployment to descriptor file is fixed. That is with web.xml under web.inf folder. Clear? Understand this clearly? Understand this point clearly? Is it possible to change the name and location of the web.xml file in web applications? That's the question. What is the answer for this question? Now tell me. The name and location of the deployment descriptor file is fixed. that is with web.xml under what their web.inf folder. Always web.xml file must be provided under what location there? Web.inf folder. Web.inf folder will be available where? Under application folder. Application folder is available where? In Tomcat? No, under web apps folder. Web apps folder is available where? Under Tomcat 10.0 folder. So web.xml file name and location is fixed. Why? Because why it is fixed? Why it is fixed? No, when we reason I'm telling there why it is no, when we submit request from client to server, when we submit request from client to server, when we submit request from client to server for a particular servlet, container will search for the deployment descriptor with the name web.xml file under the location web.inf folder in order to get the name and location of the requested resource. Here I can specify that requested servlet, the name and location of the requested servlet. That's it. There's an internal reason here. What's the point here? When we submit a request from client to server for a particular servlet, then what container will do? Container will search for the deployment descriptor with the name web.xml file under the location web.inf folder in order to get the name and the location of the requested servlet. Container has to know for what servlet this request is coming or not. So container will go to web.xml file. If container wants to go for web.xml file, their container has to search for this web.xml file or not. Container must search for this web.xml file with what details they know, with which name, web.xml, under which location, under web.inf folder. Yes, sir. Got it or not? Under web.inf folder. That's it now. This is a clear-cut information here. We can understand. This is the question and answer here we provided. Is my point is clear or not? All right, sir. Now this is one thing here. Next, another question. All of you understand this. These questions are simple questions, but required attention. All right. What is my another question here? Observe carefully. Is it possible to prepare web applications without web.xml file? Without web.xml file? Is it possible to prepare web applications without web.xml file? Right. We have to understand answer for this question. What is the question here I'm telling there? Is it possible to prepare web applications without a web.xml file? Think of it. All right, sir. One point I'm telling there. I want to prepare a web application. Listen carefully, all of you know. Cases are available. That cases here I'm going to discuss with you, but try to understand it now. Okay. First case number one. First case number one. Before servlet 3.x version and after servlet 3.x version. If you observe this, after servlet 3.x version, annotations are available as an alternative for web.xml file. So no need to provide web.xml file. Right from which version there? 3.x version onwards. Servlets 3.x version onwards, alternative for web.xml file is what there? Annotations. When annotations are available, web.xml file is what there? Optional. Before 3.x version, up to servlets 2.5 version, web.xml file is optional or mandatory depending on the cases. What are the cases? Case number 1. If you prepare web application without using the server-side components like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on, that means not required to have web.xml file actually there. So we are not using any component which are required to be registered in web.xml file. We don't have any such kind of components. In that way, I prepared web application. Just only HTML pages I provided there in my web application. There, web.xml file is mandatory or optional is depending on the server what we have used. So observe carefully. See, two classifications I'm telling there. First point, what I'm telling there, servlet 3.x version before, servlet 3.x version after. From servlet 3.x version after, web.xml file is completely optional, not mandatory. Completely optional, not mandatory. Why? Because in place of this web.xml file, we can use what their annotations. Annotation support is available. But before before servlet 3.x version, web.xml file is mandatory or optional. Their case number 1, I'm telling there, case number 1, if you prepare the web application without the server-side components like servlets and filters, listeners, and so on, where web.xml file is optional or mandatory, completely depending on what there, depending on the server which you have used. There are examples I'm telling there. If it is a Tomcat, web.xml file is optional. If it is a server like WebLogic, no, web.xml file is mandatory. Even though we are not using anything, even though we are not providing anything in web.xml file, but still web.xml file is required where web app tag open and web app tag closed is required without having any data, other data. Answer my point clearly. In the case, if we prepare the web application with the web resources like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on, then it's mandatory to write what there web.xml file. Then it is mandatory to write like what there web.xml file. These are the points here we have to understand. Of course, interviewer may expect the question answer for this question is what there annotations is an alternative. Like this, interviewer is expert, but complete analysis, if we want to provide these many points here, we have to discuss. Come again, what exactly the points can I given to you? Tell me guys, what exactly the points I'm telling to you? First one is it possible to prepare web applications without web.xml file or not? Indirectly I'm asking there, web.xml file is mandatory or optional in web applications? That's our question here. So what is the answer here? No, answer is very clear. First point I'm telling there, up to servlets 2.5 version, web.xml file is optional or mandatory is totally depending on the server which you have used. Case number 1. If you prepare web applications without the server-side components like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on, then web.xml file is optional or mandatory depending on the server only. If you use the servers like Tomcat, no, web.xml file is optional for that case. If you use the servers like WebLogic or JBoss or maybe some other, where web.xml file is mandatory, at least with the open and close tag, web app tag, it is mandatory. In the case, if you prepare the web applications, like what there with the servlets, filters, listeners, no, this configuration is required in web.xml file. So their web.xml file is mandatory. Their web.xml file is mandatory as we need to configure servlets and filters and what next one here listeners in web.xml file. So where web.xml file is mandatory. But this is up to what there? This is up to servlets 2.5 version. But when we go with the servlets 3.x version, when we go with the servlets 3.x version, in a servlets 3.x version, annotations are available. Even though we are using servlets and filters, listeners in our web applications there, but still web.xml file is optional. There we can go with what there annotations concepts. Yes, sir. All of you are getting clarity or not? All of you are following this point or not? Somewhat theoretical point only, but cases are available. Of course, if I write the document, you can understand it clearly. But my intention is what there, before writing the document, you have to give the clarity. Yes, sir. All of you are getting it or not? All right. All boys are listening properly, sir, but girls are not listening now. Sleeping. especially 2 members. Can I ask core Java questions? No? Can I ask core Java questions? Not even advanced Java. Core Java questions. Can I ask no? Collections topic is very, very important, right? Can I ask questions on collections? No? Yes, sir. Not for boys, for girls only. Collections, girls related topic. Right. So anyway, then these are the fundamentals. Then if you know the points there, then remaining part will be very simple. Observe carefully. If you are neglecting now, the remaining points will not be proper for you. Again and again, I'm telling there. Why I'm putting this much of time on fundamentals now? If you are strong in fundamentals, then programming will be very simple. If you are not strong in fundamentals, no, then programming will be very much tough. That's why I'm discussing about all these points. Moreover, these points will make you to understand the concepts easily, and at the same time will increase confidence level 5. So this is a very, very important interview question. Every interview will ask this question there. If any interviewer wants to ask some questions deeply in servlets, no, definitely they will touch this type of questions. Moreover, this question is somewhat like in general question, somewhat related with annotations. Now. Nowadays, the trending is what there in Java applications, no, annotations only. Everywhere annotations. Once we complete JDBC, then servlets onwards, remaining total technologies are associated with annotations only. 70% of the programming we are going to do with what there annotations. So that related point here I'm telling to you. Now tell me. Anyway, I given some point. My part is completed, but remaining part is your understanding only. Now I want to check how much you are understanding there. So is it mandatory to write web.xml file in web applications? This is my question. What is your answer here? Answer is what? Is it mandatory to provide web.xml file in web applications? Answer is what there? Providing web.xml file, that is web.xml file in web applications is optional or mandatory, is totally depending on the cases. What are the cases now? Case number one, up to servlet 2.5 version, that is case number one. Case number two, from servlet 3.x version. These two cases I have taken. Now coming to the first case, up to servlet 2.5 version, inside that case, what I am telling now, inside this case, what I am telling there, see, if we prepare the web applications without using the server side components like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on, web.xml file is optional or mandatory is depending on the server what we are using. If we use Tomcat server, web.xml file is not required. If we use a servers like WebLogic, where web.xml file is required. The second sub point under the first case, if we prepare the web applications with servlets, filters, listeners, and so on, where their configuration is required in web.xml file. So web.xml file is mandatory. Web.xml file is mandatory. Okay, first case is completed. First case, two sub points are given. Tell me what is the first case now? Come on, what is the first case now? Up to servlets 2.5 version, where 2 points are given. What are the 2 points now? First point is what there? If we prepare the web application without the server side resources like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on, then web.xml file is optional or mandatory, is completely depending on what there server what we have used. Examples are given. If we use the Tomcat server, web.xml file is optional. If we use WebLogic kind of server, web.xml file is mandatory. Then second sub point I have given there. If we prepare the web application with the server side resources like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on, then mandatory or not? Web.xml file is what there? Mandatory. That is case number one. Now coming to the case number two. In case number two, straight. What is the case number two? Right from servlets 3.x version. Right from servlets 3.x version, annotations support is available for configuration details where web.xml file is completely optional. Web.xml file is purely optional. Even though we prepare web application with servlets, servlets, filters, listeners, Even if we prepare web application without the server-side resources, web.xml file is totally what there optional due to the availability of what there annotations. Annotation support is available. Sir, all of you are getting clarity or not? Right? Still no response. Right. Now let us see. Let us see the content here. Easily we can understand these points. No. All right. Now. Observe carefully. Right. In web applications, web.xml file is optional or mandatory is depending on the following cases. Case 1. All right, sir. In web applications, web.xml file is optional or mandatory depending on the following cases. Case number 1. Up to servlets 2.5 version. Up to servlets 2.5 version. This is case number 1. Up to servlets 2.5 version. All right, sir. Now here I'm telling there point number 1. Sub points here I'm telling there point number 1. If we prepare web application, if we prepare web applications without using the server side components, or server side resources, both are same components like servlets, filters, then after that listeners. Actually, why I'm pointing on these, no, these configurations are required in web.xml file in general. That's what I'm telling there. If you prepare the web applications without using the server-side components like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on, then web.xml file is optional or mandatory, is completely depending on is completely depending on the server. Fine, is completely depending on what their server. Observe carefully. Depending on the server. Now the point is like what I'm telling to you after this. Is completely depending on the server. Now understand this point here. Now, what's the point here? If we use this server like Tomcat, then web.xml file is optional. Then web.xml file is what there optional. If we use the servers, like Tomcat, like WebLogic, then web.xml file is a mandatory. Right, sir. Now this is about like what there. This is about like what there up to servlet 2.5 version. But the point is like what there. If we prepare web applications without using server-side resources, server-side components like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on. This is a case here. Next point is like what there. If we prepare the web applications, with the server side components like servlets, filters, and listeners and so on, then what is this point here? Now tell me, then web.xml file is what there? Then web.xml file is mandatory. Web.xml file is what there? Mandatory. That's it now. This is like what there? Case 1 I'm giving there. Next one is like what there? Case 2. What is this case 2 here? Right from servlets 3.x version. Right from servlets 3.x version. This is case 3. What is this case 3 here? Right from servlets 3.x version. In servlets 3.x version, web.xml file is optional irrespective of writing the server side components, irrespective of having the server side components like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on. Got my point or not? Irrespective of having the server side components like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on, web.xml file is what they're optional. Why? Because what is the reason for it? No, why? Because servlets 3.x version has provided servlet 3.x version has provided annotations as an alternative for web.xml file. Servlet 3.x version has provided an alternative for what their web.xml file. Alright, for providing application configuration details, web application configuration details, annotation support is provided there. With the help of these annotations, we can remove web.xml file. That's it. Now, this is the clear-cut awareness here. We can understand clearly. Yes, sir, all of you are getting my point or not? So here, totally 2 interview questions. What are the 2 interview questions I have given there? Question number 1. Is it possible to change the name and location of the web.xml file in web applications? Answer is what there? The name and location of the deployment descriptor is fixed. That is with the web.xml under what there? Web folder. Of course, answer for this question is what there? Direct answer is what there? No. Got my point or not? Direct answer is what there? No. Alright, sir. The name and location of the deployment descriptor file is fixed. That is with web.xml under web folder. Why? Because when we submit a request from client to server for a particular servlet, container will search for the deployment descriptor with the name web.xml file under the location web folder in order to get the name and location of the requested servlet. Name and location of the requested servlets. Alright, sir. Then after that, another question here. Is it possible to prepare web applications without web.xml file? Answer for this question is what there? In web applications, web.xml file is optional or mandatory depending on the following cases. It's totally depending on what their following cases. Case 1, up to servlets 2.5 version. If you prepare web applications without using server-side components like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on, then web.xml file is optional or mandatory, completely depending on what their server. If we use the servers like Tomcat, then web.xml file is optional. If we use the servers like WebLogic, then web.xml file is mandatory. Second one, if we prepare web applications with the server-side components like servlets, filters, and so on, listeners, and so on, then web.xml file is mandatory. All right, sir. Case number 2, right from servlets 3.x version. In servlets 3.x version, web.xml file is optional, irrespective of having the server-side components like servlets, filters, listeners, and so on. Why? Because servlet 3.x version has provided annotations as an alternative for what there? Web.xml file. Sir, all of you are getting clarity on this point, sir? Not? That's okay, fine now. This is a clear-cut information here we have to understand. All right, sir. Now there is a question, guys. All of you understand this clearly. Right, sir. Understand this question, no? If we have 100 classes, do we need to map all in web.xml? 100 classes in the sense might be in our point of view 100 servlets, no, right? Of course, the point is right. As it is, whatever the thought you are having, that's 100% right. If we have multiple servlets, and if it is mandatory to write these servlets configuration in web.xml file, then we must provide all multiple servlets entries inside the web.xml file. All servlets configurations we have to provide in web.xml file. That's clear? All of you are getting my point clearly, no? 100 servlets are available in my application. 100 servlets configuration details we have to provide in what their web.xml file. 100 number of servlet tags we have to write. 100 number of servlet mapping tags we have to write. That's mandatory. Okay, right, sir. Then another question here. Sir, from 3.x version onwards, web.xml file is optional for non-Tomcat servers also. Yes, exactly. Even in non-Tomcat servers, WebLogic or JBoss, whatever it may be, their web.xml file is becoming as what they're optional. Right, perfect. The same answer here now. All right, guys. Now these are about somewhat questions here we can understand clearly about this web.xml file. With this basic data, we can move on to the next step. This information is sufficient to move on to what their next step. Got it or not? But somewhat extra information I want to talk about web.xml file. Try to understand this clearly about this servlet configurations now. Now the next point here, what I'm telling to you, observe carefully. The next point here is what there. URL pattern definitions. URL pattern definitions in a web.xml file. In web.xml file, URL pattern definitions in web.xml file. Approaches to define URL pattern. In other words, I can say that, or else maybe instead of this, I want to write like what there. Approaches to define URL patterns in web.xml file. That's it. Now this is somewhat interesting. Now try to understand the content here. Somewhat interesting and somewhat important here. Maybe in the future we are able to get clarity on these points now when I'm moving to the content here. Anyway, web.xml file topic is available. That's why I'm discussing about these concepts here. But in the future we are going to understand it. So this topic is very much useful for the frameworks, especially for web frameworks like Struts framework, JSF framework, and maybe some other frameworks there. That feature is very much important, but we are going to see the content. Right. There are three approaches to define URL patterns. To define what their URL patterns for the server-side components. Actually, URL pattern is required for two components mainly, servlets and filters. Not for listeners, not for some other components. No. URL patterns are required for two components mainly, servlets and filters. No. For remaining things, URL patterns are not mandatory. Okay. Anyway, for these two also it is required. No. So we are going to understand it. Overall, how many approaches are available to define URL patterns? No. Two approaches. Three approaches are existed here. What are the three approaches here? First one is, observe my point here. First one is exact match method. URL pattern definition. First approach is what there? Exact match method. Next one is directory match method. Directory match method. Last one, directory match method. Another one is like what there? Extension match method. Extension match method. These are overall three approaches are available to define URL patterns. Everybody understand these points clearly. Right, sir. Exact match method, directory match method. Next one is what there? Extension match method. Okay. Right, so now see this one. What exactly the meaning of exact match method? We'll see this point here. Exact match method. What is the meaning of it now? See, observe carefully. In this approach, we will define the URL pattern in this approach we will define the URL pattern with the following conditions. We'll define the URL pattern with the following conditions. Observe carefully. URL pattern must be started with a slash, forward slash. URL pattern must be started with what there? Forward slash. Okay. Pattern name may be anything. No conditions on it. Some anything here we can provide. Must be started with a slash. Pattern name may be anything. Only these are the two things here we can understand now. Now see this example here I'm telling there. Example in web.xml file. Example here we can understand. Now see this. What is this example here? Web app. Under this web app, so many tags are available. Out of these, one of the tag here we need to provide like what there? Servlet mapping. Inside this servlet mapping, here we can provide like what there? So many tags now. Now here I need to provide like what there? URL pattern. Where in that URL pattern, pattern name must be started with what there? Forward slash. Got it or not? Then after that, pattern name may be anything we can write. Say for example, I want to write like what there? Login slash URL pattern. Okay, then after that slash servlet mapping. Then here some other content here. Now observe carefully slash web app. Sir, just 5 minutes. Put concentration here now. So then first approach is what there now tell me exact match method. Overall 3 approaches are available. What are the 3 approaches now? Exact match method. Second one is what there? Directory match method. Third one is what there? Extension match method. In exact match method, what I'm telling there, in this approach, we will define the URL pattern with the following conditions. What is that first condition here? URL pattern must be started with what there? Slash. And pattern name, URL pattern name may be anything. URL pattern name may be anything. No conditions on it. Okay, then as per that here I've written something else like what there? Slash login. Yes, sir, got it or not? Slash login. So here, what is that point here I'm telling there? Observe carefully the point. No, in this case, if we want to access the respective server side component, that means URL pattern we define in the sense definitely some server side component name is available or not, some servlet class is available or not. Right. In this case, if you want to access the respective server side component, then we must provide, then we have to use an URL pattern at a client browser. Then we have to use an URL pattern at what there? Client browser that must be matched exactly. That must be matched exactly. That must be matched exactly with the URL pattern which we define in a web.xml file. Observe carefully what I am telling to you. Right, sir. Please understand this one. This point is very, very important. In this case, if you want to access the respective server-side component, after defining URL pattern in web.xml file, definitely one server-side component is available or not? One servlet is exist or not? Yes, sir. Servlet is exist or not? See, in web.xml file, just have not used that exact tags now. URL pattern, if you define like this in the sense, definitely one servlet class is available or not? If you want to access that respective server-side component, then we have to use an URL pattern at a client browser that must be matched exactly with the URL pattern which we define in the web.xml file. So what I'm telling there, http:// localhost 1010 / application name, something else like what there, application1 app1 / whatever the URL pattern here I provided, this URL pattern and this URL pattern must be matched exactly. Then only a respective server side component will be executed. So all of you are getting it or not? Right, so now this is one point. Now observe carefully. Second one, third one, fourth one. Some examples here I'm taking there. Right, sir. First one is okay. Second one is like what I'm telling there, something else like ABC. Now again. login. This I want to say like what there is something else registration. Now tell me, out of all these things, which one is valid here? This one is valid. If the condition is like what there, exactly the name must be matched. Then only the respective server side resource will be evaluated. First one is valid. What about the second one here? Valid or invalid? No. Damn sure invalid. Third one is what there? Valid or invalid? No. Again invalid. Of course. 2 times slash login we provided here, but still it is invalid. Next one is totally invalid. Why? Because that we are specifying like what there? REG. No. This is like what there? Invalid. It's clear or not? So whatever the URL pattern we define there in web.xml file with the same name, we have to provide it our client browser. Then only respective server side resource will be evaluated. Otherwise, it will not be evaluated. Otherwise, the respective server side component will not be executed. Clear to all of you? Now, this is like what method here? Exact match method. Clear or not? Then what is this next one here? Come on, sir. What is this next one? Directory match method. Directory match method. Okay. All right, sir. Shall we see this point on tomorrow? Directory match method. So then tomorrow we are going to see this particular content. So tomorrow come for the regular sessions only, normal sessions, and Sunday schedule I will provide in tomorrow. Sunday definitely I'll increase some duration here for both the servlets and as well as Spring classes. No, so tomorrow normal class only, no changes on it. But day after tomorrow definitely we'll have some sessions. Okay, that's all, guys. That's all for today. Then tomorrow we'll meet. Tomorrow we'll see the remaining content. All right, sir. Thank you, guys. Those who are attending in online, use the same link tomorrow. No changes on this link. No, use the same link on tomorrow so that we can see the content. Okay. The Java 8 features class I will take, sir. I will take. Maybe today onwards I'll take the classes. No, Manas. Yeah, definitely I will take it today. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Today onwards we'll have class there. Don't worry. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So up to now I suffered from eye infection, sir. Then still I'm taking some classes there. Then demo class or this class I have taken there. But today onwards perfectly all right. No problem. Then I'll take the sessions. Don't worry. Thank you. Same link. Same link, guys.